Parenting is often described as one of the most rewarding experiences in life, but what happens when that joy turns into an unrelenting nightmare? Sometimes, the most terrifying stories don't involve ghosts, demons, or monsters. They involve real-life moments where the unexplainable, the horrifying, and the tragic collide. These true parenting horror stories will make you question what lurks in the shadows of your own home. Subscribe now on Horror's Triangle. Jenna had just put her 6-month-old daughter, Lily, to sleep and turned on the baby monitor, an essential piece of equipment for any new parent. She curled up in bed with her husband, the static hum of the monitor providing a subtle reassurance that everything was fine. At 2:43 a.m., a noise startled her awake. It wasn't Lily crying, it was a voice. "She's such a beautiful baby." Jenna's blood ran cold. The voice was male, deep, and calm. She stared at the baby monitor in horror. Her husband, now fully awake, sat up and grabbed his phone to check the security cameras. There was no one in Lily's room, and the windows were all locked. Yet, the voice continued. "She's waking up now." Lily let out a wail, her tiny cries filling the monitor. Jenna bolted from her bed and into the nursery. The room was empty except for Lily, who was now sitting up in her crib, staring at the baby monitor with wide, fearful eyes. The police found no signs of forced entry. Later, Jenna learned that baby monitors, especially Wi-Fi-connected ones, could be hacked. But the question that still haunts her, who was watching her child and for how long? Dan and Lisa had just moved into a new home with their 5-year-old daughter, Emma. The neighborhood was quiet, safe, the kind of place where you let your kids play outside without worry. One evening, Lisa was doing dishes when she saw Emma in the backyard, staring at her bedroom window. Lisa dried her hands and stepped outside. "Sweetheart, what are you looking at?" Emma pointed to her window and said in a small voice, "The lady in my room." Lisa's stomach turned to ice. "What lady?" "The one who watches me sleep. She waves at me sometimes." Lisa ran into the house, up to Emma's room, and found nothing. The window was locked, and the room was empty. She convinced herself it was just Emma's imagination. But that night, as she was tucking Emma in, her daughter whispered, "Mommy, she's behind you." Lisa turned, heart pounding, but the room was empty. They moved out a month later after the nightmares began. To this day, Emma insists that the woman is still looking for her. When Laura's son, Ben, turned 4, he developed an imaginary friend named Charlie. She found it adorable until Charlie started telling Ben things he shouldn't have known. "Charlie says you had a baby before me, but she didn't come home." Laura dropped the plate she was holding. Years before Ben was born, she had suffered a miscarriage. It was something she had never told her son. Shaking, she asked, "How do you know that?" Ben giggled. "Charlie told me. He said she's with him now." Laura's breath hitched. "Where is Charlie?" Ben pointed to the empty hallway. "Right there." Laura stopped asking about Charlie after that. A month later, Ben told her Charlie had to leave. When she asked why, he said, "Because my sister is going with him. She says goodbye." To this day, Laura has no explanation. Mark and Amanda had just brought home their newborn, Ethan. Sleep-deprived and exhausted, they took turns getting up for night feedings. One night, Mark woke up to the sound of Amanda whispering in the dark. "Shoo, it's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." Half asleep, he rolled over. "Do you need help?" Amanda's voice came from the bed beside him. "What are you talking about?" Mark sat up. Amanda was lying next to him, sound asleep. The whispering continued from the nursery. Heart pounding, Mark grabbed a baseball bat and ran to Ethan's room. The crib was empty. The whispering stopped. Frantic, they turned on the lights only to find Ethan sound asleep in the bassinet by their bed. They moved out the following month. One night, Alice was putting her 3-year-old son, Jake, to bed when he asked a chilling question. "Mommy, where do I go when I sleep?" Alice frowned. "What do you mean, baby?" Jake hesitated. "I go somewhere. I walk, but my feet don't touch the floor. There are people, but they don't have faces. Alice brushed it off as a dream until one night, she woke up to find Jake standing in the hallway, staring at the front door. Jake. Honey, what are you doing? Jake turned to her, his expression blank. I have to go back. They're waiting. Alice grabbed him and shook him awake. His eyes cleared, and he started crying. Mommy, I don't want to go anymore. That night, Alice locked every door and window. Jake never sleepwalked again, but for years, he refused to sleep without a nightlight, terrified that the faceless people would find him. Parenting comes with a set of worries: monsters under the bed, the fear of losing a child in a crowded place, but sometimes, the things that terrify us the most come from our own homes, whispered in the dead of night, caught in the static of a baby monitor, or seen in the dark corners of a child's room. What would you do if your child told you something you couldn't explain? Would you dismiss it or start sleeping with the lights on? The swing set stood silhouetted against the bruised purple sky, a lonely sentinel in the encroaching twilight. Its metal frame, usually a vibrant yellow, seemed to have absorbed the gloom, now a sickly, jaundiced hue. A single swing creaked rhythmically in the rising wind, a sound that grated on Sarah's nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. 10 minutes. 10 agonizing minutes since she'd last seen Emily. Sarah prided herself on being a vigilant parent. No helicopter parenting, she'd always scoffed, but definitely not the neglectful kind either. But tonight, vigilance had failed her. Emily, all of 7 years old, with her bright, inquisitive eyes and a gap-toothed grin that could melt glaciers, had asked to play outside just as the sun began its descent. Just for a little while, Mommy, please, she'd pleaded, her small hand tugging at Sarah's sleeve. Sarah, distracted by a work email and the promise of a few minutes of peace, had relented. Okay, sweetie, but stay where I can see you, she'd cautioned, glancing out the kitchen window at the swing set. It was a familiar routine. Emily loved the swings, her laughter echoing through the quiet suburban evening. But the laughter had stopped. Sarah, finally emerging from her email-induced haze, found the swing set empty. Panic, cold and clammy, gripped her heart. She'd called out Emily's name, her voice cracking with rising fear, but only the wind answered. This was every parent's nightmare, the primal fear that lurked in the shadows, the what-if that could shatter a life in an instant. Sarah's mind raced, conjuring up every horrifying scenario imaginable. Had someone snatched her daughter? Was she lost in the rapidly darkening woods bordering their backyard? Had she wandered off, lured by some unknown danger? The next few hours were a blur of frantic searching, desperate calls to 911, and the agonizing wait for the police to arrive. The neighborhood, usually quiet and peaceful, was now teeming with flashing lights and concerned faces. Sarah's husband, Mark, arrived home from work, his face etched with worry. They searched together, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their voices hoarse from shouting Emily's name. As the night wore on, the initial panic morphed into a gnawing, bone-deep dread. Sarah remembered stories she'd heard on the news, whispers of children vanishing without a trace. The world, once a safe and predictable place, now seemed like a vast, predatory wilderness. Emily was eventually found, not kidnapped, not lost, but huddled in the crawl space beneath their house, sobbing uncontrollably. She'd been playing hide-and-seek, she explained, her small voice trembling. She'd thought it would be a fun surprise. Relief washed over Sarah, so intense it almost made her weak. But the relief was fleeting, replaced by a lingering unease. The image of the empty swing set, the silence where Emily's laughter should have been, was burned into her memory. The fear, she knew, would stay with her, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the ever-present dangers lurking just beyond the edge of their carefully constructed world. This was just one story, one snapshot of the countless horrors, big and small, that parents face every day. There's the story of the toddler who swallowed a button battery, the corrosive acid burning through his esophagus before doctors could intervene. There's the teenager who overdosed on pills she'd bought online, seeking escape from the pressures of school and social media. There's the young boy, bullied relentlessly at school, who took his own life, leaving behind a note filled with despair and a swing set that now stood forever empty. These stories, whispered in hushed tones in parent groups and online forums, are the true horror stories. They're not tales of monsters under the bed or ghosts in the attic. They're stories of real-life tragedies, fueled by accidents, illness, and the complex, often unfathomable, realities of human nature. There's the story of the mother who, exhausted after a sleepless night with her newborn, accidentally rolled over on her infant during a brief nap, a tragedy that shattered her world in an instant. There's the father who, distracted by his phone, backed his car out of the driveway, unaware that his young son was behind him. These are the stories that keep parents awake at night, the what-ifs that haunt their dreams. They're the stories that make them question their own judgment, their own ability to protect their children from the myriad dangers that exist in the world. The internet, while a source of information and connection, has also become a breeding ground for these parental anxieties. Stories of online predators, cyberbullying, and dangerous social media challenges spread like wildfire, fueling a constant sense of unease. Parents are bombarded with warnings, advice, and statistics, creating a climate of fear that can be overwhelming. And then there are the internal battles, the struggles that parents face within themselves. The postpartum depression that can cloud a mother's joy and make her feel like a failure. The anxiety that can make a father feel inadequate and overwhelmed. The guilt that can consume parents when they make mistakes, even small ones. These internal struggles are often hidden, unspoken, but they're just as real, and just as terrifying, as the external threats. They're the silent battles fought in the quiet moments, the doubts that whisper in the darkness, the fears that claw at the edges of their sanity. Parenting is an act of love, but it's also an act of constant vigilance, a never-ending battle against the forces that threaten to harm their children. It's a journey filled with joy, laughter, and immeasurable love, but it's also a journey fraught with fear, anxiety, and the ever-present awareness of the fragility of life. The swing set remains, a silent witness to the joys and the terrors of parenthood. It's a reminder that even in the most ordinary moments, danger can lurk, and that the greatest horror stories are often the ones that are ripped from the headlines, the ones that are based on real-life experiences, the ones that could happen to anyone. And it's a reminder that the most important thing a parent can do is to love their children fiercely, protect them to the best of their ability, and cherish every moment, because no one is ever guaranteed tomorrow.